Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
What a save by Fry! The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners!
Here comes Rui Diaz through the middle to crown it for Seattle! And now they truly can start the celebrations. It's the Sounders MLS Cup.
Nico Ladero leaves absolutely no doubt! The Sounders rule the region! Seattle Sounders is campeón! It's gone! They're gone! Finally!
This feels fucking awesome.
This is a tiny dog.
Nice work on your little yacht thing.
And Portland can't say shit.
You know, what was the thought process in terms of who you decided to use and who you didn't?
Ever since Sounder at Heart wrote a commentary that we didn't take Mailbag seriously.
This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest. Welcome to another episode of Nos Arietes, part of the Sounder at Heart podcast network, sponsored by Full Pull Wines, our subscribers, and our newest sponsor, Body Spec. We're recording on Tuesday, April 22nd, 2025. I am your host, Jeremiah O'Shan. Joining me today is my co-host, Aaron Campo, and our engineer, Lickett. I'm going to welcome myself back from a week off in Mexico that I was with family. And then also just sharing that this is going to be a little bit of a combo episode. We're going to talk about the Nashville game. We're also going to be doing answering mailbag questions from April. All that said, Aaron, what were your big takeaways from the Nashville win?
It was a lot of fun. It was the most fun I'd had at a game in a while, which was real nice.
Oh, you
have
went,
a great,
right?
I did, yeah, and didn't have a great record last year. The other game I've been to this year was a Charlotte game, so that was not as fun. And yeah, I thought the Sounders were really impressive. I thought that they were pretty clearly the better team for the entire game. They were still pushing late for goals, despite having an extremely comfortable lead, which I really appreciated. I thought they did a good job in the second half of finding the right balance between not necessarily shutting down and just hanging on to what they had, but also not doing anything dumb. They were pretty well in control the whole time, but it was still fun to watch. And I think, it was a crummy day out early season, obviously coming off a win against Dallas, but haven't had a home win in a bit. I think it was exactly the kind of performance they needed. The crowd was into it, very energized. And yeah, I think, you can't ask for much more in April, right? From this team or just sports entertainment in general. Sports entertainment, God, I shouldn't be saying that. But yeah, I thought Ryan Kent looked fantastic in his little cameo there. Looking forward to seeing what he can do with some more minutes. And I just think it's it's really the first time in a while that we've seen the Sounders clicking on all cylinders in attack. And I think people are tired of hearing about injuries, and I think that's totally reasonable. But I think it's very, very clear that this is a really good team that got hit by a bunch of injuries that, hit one position group pretty hard. And they don't have to be at full strength to be extremely good. They just,
we're not the first people to point this out. This has been well documented, but it's worth repeating that this is a team. This game started with Danny Musovski at forward, with Jesus Ferreira and Pedro de la Vega at the number 10, with Kim Keehee at center back. It was not their first choice group at all. And then you look at who they bring off. They're able to bring, and by the time they bring Jordan Morris, Albert Rusnak, who else? Alex Roldan, João Paulo, and Ryan Kent off the bench, they're already up 3-0. And that is a real kind of embarrassment of riches to be able to do that. It was similar to the LAFC game, except in this one, Nashville basically started their first choice group. So while the Sounders sort of thumped the backup Sounders thumped the backup LAFC in that game, this was the Sounders, a pretty rotated group, essentially, really taking it to a first choice Nashville team. And Nashville, people may have not realized this, but Nashville came into this game looking pretty good. They were solidly in playoff position. They're 4-3-1. And more than that, they were also, by all the underlying numbers, one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference. So this was a really comprehensive, I thought, encouraging win. The fact that it comes after the Dallas win, which was also a shutout, although not as convincing, although still convincing in its own ways. I just think there's every reason to be optimistic at this point. I know you guys kind of touched on that last week, but this to me was just a very clear step forward in terms of what this team is capable of.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that when you look at the teams in the league that you consider the best teams, they're not winning every game against the Nashvilles of the world 3-0 at home, but they've got a decent sprinkling of those throughout the season. And they're getting results like the Sounders got against Dallas. It's not common that teams blow even halfway decent teams away on the road. So a 1-0 in Dallas is fine, and when you can turn that around and put together a 5-2 against LAFC, a 3-0 against Nashville, that's when you start to have to look at a team as being in the top tier of teams. Obviously, where the Sounders are on the table, they had a down run through March and into the beginning of April. So they've still got a ways to go to prove themselves. But they've got a good chance to do that, in the next 5 games. And I think if they are as good as they've looked, if they can get through those 5 games with performances that reflect that, and they get the results that reflect those performances, I think that they're going to look pretty comfortable in the standings as long as they don't regress.
Yeah, I mean, I think this week is going to be a good test. They're going at Colorado. Colorado has been sort of an up and down team, but it's a team that if the Sounders are as good as they looked against Nashville, they should be very competitive this week against Colorado. And like I said, it's a good test for them. We'll see. But right now where we sit, I don't see a team with a whole bunch of weaknesses, and I dug this stat up and I thought it's pretty telling that when one of Jordan Morris or Danny Musovski are playing, and as it were, it's convenient that neither one of them haven't played together at all. But they've played at least one of them has been on the field for, 538 minutes, according to my notes. During those 538 minutes, the Sounders have outscored their opponents 12-6, and they have an XG advantage of basically like 1.9 to 0.8 per 90 minutes. And then when they're not playing, they've been outscored 5-0 in about 270 minutes or so, 272 minutes. And they've been outscored 5-0 in those 272 minutes. And then their XG is like 0.65 to 0.8 or something like that. So it's like they're about the same defensively, but their scoring, both by the XG and by the actual goals, goes down a lot when they don't have a real number 9 on the field. That's really the takeaway. And you can argue that this team is maybe overly necessitating a real number 9 to be effective. And I suppose that's a reasonably fair criticism. But they've got 2 who they both look really good when they're on the field. And Danny Musovski looked great in this game, I thought. The goal that he got was well taken, even if it was offside originally, but it was very clearly quite onside. And he was just like, he did the job. And then Jordan came on and he made a bunch of really good runs. He deserved a goal. I thought Joe Willis made a couple really good saves on him. I just think if you have one, if this team it's not that it's not an incomplete team. It's that they only go so deep at every position, right? And when you take your 2 number 9s off the field, it's going to be tough.
Yeah, and I think that's true for every team in the world. I mean, I think there are some teams that don't have true number 9s, but they have a false 9, or they have another position group where if it gets hit that hard, it's going to cause problems. I do think that it's good to know what we know about the Sounders forward group, to know that Jesus Ferreira is probably not going to give you what you need at that number 9 spot. So, maybe that's a position you want to try to strengthen in the summer window, whether it be, some freely available talent or what have you. But it's also good to know it's like, well, Danny Musovski can do a job and the team can look good with him at the 9. We have proof of concept of that, right? Two straight games, I think, where the team has just looked much better with him there.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is that any team that suffers injuries to their top 2 guys at such an important position is going to struggle. And that's just kind of the nature of the beast in this league. You can't go 3 or 4 guys deep at any one position. And so you just got to hope they can stay healthy, right? That's the big thing. And there's really not a whole lot you can do about that other than hope. And I think they've had, like, at forward at least, pretty decent luck with that the last few years. I think Jordan's injury this year was an outlier compared to how he's been since coming back from his last ACL.
Right.
So I think there's reason to be optimistic on that front.
Yeah, I think there's absolute reason. And I think it's, I thought Pedro de la Vega looked very good in this game. I think that was another reminder of how his presence on the field does change, and his absence being coinciding with Jordan and Musovski to a degree, I think was also problematic. And I think we were reminded of what he brings again in this game, where he just has this dribbling ability. He has ability to break defenses down in a different type of way. His goal was just an absolute rocket. I loved, I don't know how many times I've seen a ball kicked harder into the net than Pedro de la Vega's goal, which came off a really nice cross from Obed Vargas. Just a lot to like in this game. And again, I think Ferreira is maybe not the player we thought we were getting, but he's still an effective player. It's just that his position might be more as a number 10 and less as a number 9. And that's not ideal. I think it would be nice if he was a third, he was a third viable option at forward, but maybe he doesn't have to be. And now the Sounders kind of know that's not really a good fit for him.
Yeah, I do think, even though, we spent the last couple minutes talking about how he's probably not a great fit there, I am curious what it looks like with Ryan Kent and Pedro de la Vega giving him
I totally agree
at that position. Like, I would not hate seeing him and Jordan do some switching and seeing him more central. The no look pass from Ryan Kent, and I think it was in stoppage time, right, where it was just beyond Jesus' reach, but it's a great run by Jesus. A great job of Kent to spot it. Those are the kind of runs he was making when he was playing as a forward that weren't getting found. And so I think it's easy. I'm glad you pointed this out. I think it's easy to forget that not only was Jesus playing as the 9, he was missing those more creative
wingers
players around him. Yeah, for sure. So, but I do think you're right that it does look like he is not 2022 Jesus Ferreira, and he's probably not going to be 2022 Jesus Ferreira. But I've been pretty consistent in saying from the beginning of the year, outside of the games where he started at forward, I thought he's been really good. I think he's put in really good performances. I thought this was another really good performance. It's just different than what we were hoping for, like you said.
Yeah, I mean, he's clearly got good vision. He clearly understands sort of positional play. He's a willing, he's pretty good on the counter press. He is, there's a lot of things he does well. Right now, it doesn't look like he certainly is not a classic number 9 at this point. Whether or not he ever was, I don't know. But like, he can play as a 9. I just think it's going to be as more of a false 9. And when you have a false 9, you need real wingers to sort of stretch the field. And it wasn't just that, they didn't have, like you said, like we've said on the show, Pedro de la Vega's absence, I think, really hurt that experiment a lot. Yeah. And even if it's Georgie and Pedro, or Georgie and Ryan Kent, or Ryan Kent and Pedro, any combination of those 3 players as the 2 wingers, I think works a lot better than Rothrock and Georgie, or whatever the other options they've been able to try out. And that doesn't mean that Rothrock's not a good player. It's just that he's not the guy who's going to stretch the field in the same way. And
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And by the way, Rothrock had a really nice goal in this one too.
He did. Yeah, he played well. I think that when you contrast Rothrock to the guys that the Sounders have brought in to not necessarily replace him, but just guys that are in the same positional group that I think are a step forward, a cut above, however you want to characterize it. You can see that there's a gap there, and you can see that I think, okay, on a really good team, Paul Rothrock is probably not a first choice, but he's still a damn good player, right? And
he's shown that he's a useful player. Maybe he's not a starter in every game, but even if they're going to use wingbacks, I think he is a really good option to be playing as a wingback, especially in the way that the team is right now. He doesn't do a ton of defending, admittedly, but he's willing to get back and be in the positions. He's willing to run up and down the line, and he provides enough going forward that you can sort of live with the trade-off. Now, is he a first choice winger? I don't think on a championship team, probably not. But he doesn't have to be on this team. Like he can be your fourth or fifth wing option right now. And that's what I think is so encouraging about what we saw this week. The fact that Georgie didn't make the bench, I think illustrates how deep this team is right now. That doesn't mean that he's that he's done or anything like that. I just think that it was a good illustration of, what their options are right now. And they've got a lot of them. I guess he's going to play for Defiance on Wednesday, which probably means he's going to play for Defiance against the Timbers next week in the Open Cup, which is something that we'll have plenty of time talking about later on in the next week or so. But yeah, I mean, I don't have a whole lot else. Oh, I guess there was one other thing I wanted to talk about in this game, and that was the play of the defensive midfield, Christian Roldan and Obed Vargas, who have been sort of more up and down this year than I think we expected from them. But man, both those guys were so good in this game, just on both sides of the ball.
They were. And I think I've kind of settled on, and we'll get more into this in the Q&A section, but I've kind of settled on the belief that these guys are really, really good, but they can't be put in a position where the offense is not clicking because they're going to be under so much more pressure. If teams aren't afraid of the attack, then the midfield's going to get pressed more heavily. They're just going to have a lot more to do. They're going to be forcing the issue more frequently if they aren't, if the good runs aren't being made. And I think that has a lot to do with it. I think that soccer is such a holistic sport where if any one phase of the game isn't working, it can really screw with the other phases of the game. And I think this was a great example of that, where if Christian and Obed can do their jobs and focus on doing their jobs and not have to worry about the other guys not doing their jobs and how much stress that's putting them under, I think everything just works a lot better.
Yeah. Yeah. That's probably a good place to call this a segment. We're going to come back. We're going to do our Q&A for April. We got a lot of good questions. We'll get more into this game as well. So if you felt like we didn't do enough on this game, just stay tuned and we'll get you covered. But we're going to take a break. We'll come back. You're listening to Nos Audietes. Welcome back to Nos Audietes. So we've got a bunch of questions from our listeners, and I will just remind everyone that if you want to submit questions, we take all our questions from the Discord community. To get into the Discord, you just got to be a supporter tier or above. That's the $75 a year level, and we would love to have you. We think it's a great community in there, and you get to ask questions and get all kinds of cool insidery information. But Aaron, go ahead and fire away.
Alrighty, this first one's from Quadzilla. Given recent concerns about viewership, will the Apple deal prove beneficial to the long-term health of the MLS? Is the deal possibly more detrimental to teams that already had a strong regional media presence who now no longer get the same regional exposure?
I do think this is going to be a really interesting issue over the next year, if not more. It's funny. I actually just in the mail got a book about MLS and how great MLS is doing right now. And one of the tent poles of this article is the Apple deal and what an amazing deal it is. And it's just very funny to me that it came out at a time when we're getting a lot more sort of peeking behind the curtain of what's going on with the Apple deal. And it might not be quite all it's cracked up to be. Clearly, MLS got paid on this thing.
Yeah.
That was the biggest piece. There is really no way around that. They got something like $250 million a year for 10 years for this Apple deal, which is a lot more than they were getting from the old deal. It's a lot of money. There's no way to sort of like get around that. This was a deal about the money and they got paid. But I think what we're finding is that there is a trade-off. And one of the trade-offs is that there is not nearly the exposure that these teams were getting. And that's especially true in a market like Seattle, where all the game or virtually all the games were on over-the-air channels. So everyone in the Seattle market used to have access to, let's call it 60% of the Sounders games. And now those fans have access to none over the air, basically. And they do have, there's obviously still some cable games on, but I don't know if the Sounders have been on maybe one or a couple games a year where it's on cable. And so it's just sort of an out of sight, out of mind thing. And one of the things that we already heard sort of the beginnings of this, but I think it's Charlotte already announced that they're going to be rebroadcasting their games on some local channel 48 hours after the game. And along with that, I think there was an announcement from the league that said that basically they've now are allowing every team to go out into their market and rebroadcast these games 48 hours after the fact. Everything I'm hearing is the Sounders are going to be probably doing that. You can guess what channel that would be. Most likely the channel they used to be on. And I wouldn't be at all surprised if the Sounders actually get a bigger audience on this rebroadcast 48 hours after the game than they're getting on their streams. And I think this is a good move. I think this is a good hybrid. I think MLS absolutely needs to lean into more of this type of stuff. Like they've got to figure out a way for MLS games to probably air live locally on local channels. If for no other reason than any game that if it's free on Apple TV, each team should be allowed to rebroadcast that game, make deals locally to rebroadcast them. And I still like the product that Apple has put together, that MLS has put together on Apple. I do think that there are real trade-offs that are just becoming more and more obvious the farther into this we get.
Yeah, I think that I was hesitantly bullish, I guess, if that's a thing you can be on the deal.
Yeah, no,
I thought it showed some real initiative, and I thought that MLS has not always been willing to take risks, and I thought that this was a risk worth taking, because I do ultimately think this is where sports media is going. I still think that. But I mean, we've seen a lot of entertainment products, sports products make a move to streaming to chase these numbers and have similar issues. A sports entertainment company that I will not acknowledge by name is having tons of issues after moving to Netflix. And that was supposed to be this nailed on deal, and it was going to make their viewership so much better, and it's tanked it. And it's hurt their live, their attendance. I think that probably has something to do with the Sounders' attendance struggles to some extent. I think it's a lot harder to
maybe
get casual investors.
Not quite as ready to admit that, because a lot of people have claimed that there might be something there. I'm not quite there yet, but go on.
Yeah, I don't. I'm not willing to say that it's the cause or that it's a factor at all. But I wouldn't be shocked, if they did some kind of study and determined that it was a contributing factor. I don't think it's the main factor by any stretch, but and I think it's just I like the product as well, with some caveats. The fact that you
Yeah,
have to turn off scores
It's
every
not
time that it
perfect.
updates really pisses me off as somebody who doesn't watch every game live. But I like being able to just go to a streaming service, watch the game. That's it. I know it's going to be there.
Yeah.
It's not going to get moved around the way, like we saw with CONCACAF Champions Cup earlier this year, where they were like, oh, we're going to put it on a channel you don't have 5 minutes before the game. It's so nice not to have to deal with stuff like that. What I'm really curious about is how Apple feels about it 3 years from now when Lionel Messi's not playing in MLS anymore.
Yes.
I think that's going to be really interesting to see. But yeah, I think to actually address the question, I do think the deal is more detrimental to teams like the Sounders that got decent enough TV ratings and had a regional presence. My biggest complaint, I think, is the windows where every team is playing at the exact same time. I think that sucks really bad. One of the nice things
it's gotten
about
a little better this year, I think, but yeah,
it has. Yeah. But one of the nice things about having MLS Live was just being like, I'm just going to be lazy today and watch soccer all day long. And there's always going to be a game on. And just having a closed ecosystem is tough, but I think you nailed it, that there is a balance that you have to strike between we're in the business of making as much money as we possibly can. And this is the MLS equivalent of life-changing money, right? And I think you'd kind of be crazy not to take it, but you do have to find that balance of like, are we shutting ourselves out of?
Yeah, MLS is still a growth league, and I think they maybe over indexed on like the sickos, essentially. Like there are like I would buy this product. I get it for free as both a season ticket holder and a media member. I would happily pay. I actually think this is a pretty good value.
It's a great deal. Yeah.
I for $80 a year to be able to watch every game, that's a great deal to me. But I will admit that there are a lot of fans who think that is not, and people that would consider themselves fans who just aren't gonna buy another add-on service. Now, I think it would be different if this was just part of Apple TV, sort of the way that the EPL is part of Peacock, or the way that the Bundesliga is on. I assume it's still on ESPN. I actually don't know, but the way that if it was just sort of part of a larger product, I think it would be an easier sell. The fact that it's an add-on to it's not. I know it's not technically an add-on to an add-on, but that it's an add-on, that it's a standalone service, I think is part of what makes it a tough. One of the other on the long list of things that make it a tough sell. But it's already on sort of like a 4th tier streaming service, and then you have to sort of pay another fee to get into it is a challenge for some. And it's not Apple TV is not ubiquitous. It's not Netflix. It's not even really Peacock. It's not Paramount Plus. And I understand these are real challenges. I still think that it has a lot of potential, but I think the trade-offs are been laid a little bit more bare than maybe I was willing to admit at the beginning.
I think they have a lot of information that will inform the next deal that they
and that might tweak this deal.
Yeah, I think that if they could work out a situation like you described, where the games are free on regular Apple TV and it's not an add-on, that would go, I think, a long, long way to to improving the user experience.
Well, we spent 10 minutes on that question. We probably shouldn't spend 10 minutes on the next few. So I apologize. But I thought that was a subject that is something that I've been looking into lately. So I'm kind of passionate about. So anyway, this is from Bard Prentice. Should Dallas's willingness to offload Jesus Ferreira at what we considered a serious loss have been a bigger warning sign? We all thought Craig was just cooking, but maybe we are getting cooked. He's not looked like a player deserving of a DP elevator clause by any metric so far this year. Now, in fairness to Bard, I am pretty sure this question came in after the San Diego game, which was sort of the nadir of the Jesus Ferreira discourse. And I think in the last 2 weeks have sort of like offered some level of retribution for him.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Do you think, like, let's just take it at face value, he has not been the player that we thought he was going to be, even if it's still a decent player. Do you think that Dallas's willingness to trade him when they did should have been more of a red flag than it was?
No, I don't think so, because I think this is all stuff I think we talked about when the trade happened. He was very unhappy there. Everyone knew he was very unhappy there. That's going to hurt his value for sure.
Yeah.
And he's not the player he was in 2022. And I think we were very optimistic that he could get back to being that player, but that player would not be a TAM level player, right? That player would be a DP, no questions asked. So, I think that we acknowledged that he was damaged goods isn't the right term, but that there was some risk there, and that he wasn't the player he had been in his when he was at his best. But I mean, I think Dallas had to get rid of him. I think that much is apparent, and I don't know. I mean, I think that this was a much fairer question to ask when it was asked, right? As you acknowledged. But I think that people were far too quick to judge Jesus Ferreira. He definitely got off to a bit of a slow start, but players just take some time to adjust. I think he's looked great every time he's not played at striker this year, which is a thing that was a little frustrating to me even before the win in Dallas and before this last week, is that the sort of consensus opinion that I saw was, well, he's just been bad. And I don't think that's true at all. I think that he was ineffective as a striker in the couple of games he played there and has been quite good in every other game. So probably not good enough, early on to make him a DP, obviously.
No.
But I don't know. It's been we're 12 games into Jesus Ferreira's Sounders career.
Maybe 13 if you count, if you're
12 or 13
because he played 9 league games and 4
so
CONCACAF games.
13 games. How long did it take Clint Dempsey to score a goal for the Sounders?
About that many. I mean, it's I would say that he's been less goal dangerous than I expect. Like, I think it's fair to say he's been less goal dangerous than we thought he would be, but he's also been a really creative passer. And I think the big question right now that a lot of people are asking, and I think it's a fair question, is it feels like it's right now, the way it's set up, it feels like it's sort of a choice between him and Albert. I still think Rusnak is probably the first choice, but if he's the backup to Rusnak, that's not the worst thing in the world. And they can't play. I mean, they played together at the end of the Nashville game. I don't know. I don't think this. I'm not freaking out about the Jesus Ferreira thing. I will say that he's not been as goal dangerous as I thought he'd be. But I think in every other way, he's been
a totally fair criticism. Yeah, that's totally a fair criticism. I'm less convinced that he and Albert being on the pitch at the same time is a problem than I think a lot of people are. I think they're going to have to get some time together, but I think you can have two players playing that same style. They just need to figure out how not to step on each other's toes. If they're on at the pitch at the same time, one of them's probably going to be playing wide anyway. So I think that's
and if you have a real number 9 on the field, I think that helps too. Like, that's the other thing, is that for the most part, up until yesterday, when they've been on the field together, it hasn't always been with a number like when they were on the field together against San Jose, when Musovski was playing as the 9, they looked fine. Before that, they were struggling. So it's like, I do think it depends on who is the number 9 when they're both on the field together. But
absolutely.
Anyway.
Yeah. Next question is from Coffee IPA Beards 206 with Reed Baker Whiting. This is another one that was asked a bit ago. So it's much more timely than it might seem now. With Reed Baker Whiting back in the lineup, should we anticipate him starting over Rothrock once he is cleared to play for 60 or more?
I mean, he still hasn't played 60 for the first team. I don't think he's gotten a start yet for the first team. So I guess it's still, I don't know that we have a definitive answer. But right now, to me, Rothrock is the starter, and Reed is going to have to do something proactive to displace him. Like he's not going to step like once he's 60 minutes fit, he's not going to just start over Rothrock, I don't think. And I think that's fine. I'm still pretty bullish on Reed's potential. He's still just 19. He still has a lot of the physical tools. But I don't know where I don't see him being a starter on this team right now. Which is why I think he was probably going to get a little bit more time with Defiance. And the game against the Timbers is going to be a good opportunity for him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ready to kickstart your fitness journey? Whether you're an athlete, a fitness enthusiast, or just getting back into shape, BodySpec has you covered. For less than the price of a haircut, you can access DEXA scans, the world's most accurate body composition scan. Right now, we're offering an exclusive $10 discount on single scans, which brings the price down to $50. Just visit the site bodyspec.com/sounder@heart and use the code SOUNDER at checkout. The scans only take about 10 minutes and you get results in less than an hour. This is the same type of technology that top athletes around the world use to keep track of things like muscle mass and bone density. These types of scans traditionally cost more than twice as much. Although there are brick and mortar locations around the Puget Sound, they also have mobile facilities that visit gyms across the region. Just visit bodyspec.com/sounder@heart to get more information.
Thank you for listening to the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network, which now includes Nos Arietes, Lobbing Scorchers, and the Cooler Guild. We've been independent since August of 2023, but need your support to make sure it continues. Although this podcast is free, it's only made possible by your continued support. Memberships start as low as $25 a year, which not only helps make podcasts like this one happen, but also gets you access to everything we produce. If you're able to support us at higher levels, starting at $75 a year, you gain access to a host of other perks, most notably entry into our members-only Discord, where the smartest, funniest, and most engaged commenters share their thoughts and ideas. To find out more, just visit sounder@heart.com and click the subscribe button in the top right corner. Thanks for listening.
Nos Arietes, admittedly, is not exactly known for our spicy takes, but that doesn't mean we want our food to be mild. Spice up your life with Haxon Ferments. Handcrafted in Georgetown and made with the best local ingredients from across the Pacific Northwest, they specialize in unique small batch fermented hot sauces and vinegars. Haxon Ferments brings bold flavors and natural fermentation together for something truly special. Whether you're a heat seeker or just looking to elevate your cooking, you'll find something you love at haxonferments.com. That's HAXANFERMENTS.com. And right now, if you use the code SOUNDER@heart, that's all one word, at checkout, you will get a free hot sauce with your order. Again, go to haxonferments.com, use the code SOUNDER@heart at checkout for a free hot sauce with your order. Haxon Ferments is a proud sponsor of the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network. All right, this is from Two Left Feet. Given the pervasiveness of the number 9 in the forums of late, what is your take on the role of a 9 under Brian Schmetzer? I feel like everyone is probably operating with their own definition, with the common denominator being score goals.
I think that we have seen Brian Schmetzer operate with a number of different kinds of number 9 type players. Raul Ruiz was your classic poacher. Jordan Morris is, I think, your fairly classic modern number 9. Let's see, Nelson Valdez was a classic target man, right? Will Bruin was a big bruiser type, and they've all been effective. But I think that it's the personnel around them has worked for that type of 9. I think Brian Schmetzer could coach a team with a false 9 type player like Jesus Ferreira and be effective if he had the right players around him.
Right.
I think Schmetz is an extremely flexible tactical coach. I think he can, once he has some time to see what he's got, he can figure out a way to make it work. That's kind of the hallmark of his whole deal, right? The Sounders have had a lot of different tactical identities under Brian Schmetzer, despite what some people would have you believe. And so I think if you give him an effective forward, he's going to figure out how to make it work around them, which I think is a strength of his. I think sometimes it takes a little longer than is maybe comfortable, but I don't think, I'm sure he has his preference of a type of guy. I'm sure he does. Every coach does. But I don't think that there's like a blueprint that we can point to and say, that's the guy that Schmetz needs to make it work.
Yeah. I mean, we've kind of gone over this at this point, and you just explained it too. But I think what this really is asking is, can Jesus Ferreira be an effective number 9 for Brian Schmetzer? And I think probably, as long as he's got the right players around him. And the reality is we haven't seen that. It's a frustrating answer. I realize that, but it's
right.
I do think it's the truth. Like it depends. Like if the team is set up to have Jordan Morris or Danny Musovski type playing as the number 9.
Yeah.
And so that's going to be easier for them to play that way. That doesn't mean they can't play with other ways. They just need the right players to be like every group of players is not going to work together. And and the games where Ferreira has been at the 9, they have not had the ideal group of players around him.
Yeah. Yep. Next one is from Nate and AD. I think this is the last Jesus Ferreira question. It feels to me like Craig went and got Jesus Ferreira thinking he's a like for like with Jordan, but that Brian thinks otherwise and that he's closer to being a Rusnak or PDLV dude. Or am I crazy?
You're not. Well, I don't know if you're crazy, but I don't think Craig Weibel thought that Jesus Ferreira was a Jordan Morris clone. I don't know why he would have thought that. I think he thought that Ferreira could probably spell Morris. I think that they probably more had envisioned them playing together. Like, I don't think they got Ferreira to back up Morris. I don't think that's at all what happened. I think there was some brief dalliance with the idea that maybe Ferreira would be the 9 and Morris could be a winger. That probably is. I think we're farther away from that playing out. But I don't really think anyone was surprised by the player that Ferreira is. Again, maybe that he's not more goal dangerous than he has. Like, I don't think he's been as goal dangerous as the Sounders hoped he would be at this point. But I think fundamentally he's the player that they thought they were signing. And I think the idea that Ferreira, and I know this was something that was sort of like hot on the discussion a couple weeks ago, but I don't think it's true that like Craig Weibel freelanced and signed Ferreira without the approval of Brian Schmetzer. That's not how this works. I can assure you that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think too that Brian Schmetzer, I think, doesn't really care what kind of player you are as long as he can use you.
Right.
And I think he's looked at his team and said the best position for him is playing this way. Right. So I think I generally agree with pretty much everything you said. I would also add that I think it's a combination of Jesus Ferreira as a player that the Sounders really liked, who was available at a good price, who they thought definitely filled one major hole on the team and could potentially fill another one. And I think that it makes all the sense in the world to sign a player like that and say, okay, let's see what we have in this guy before you go out and sign a backup 9 or a backup winger or whatever, right? To get a better sense of the player that you have. And now that Danny Musovski looks more than capable of being that backup 9, maybe that removes some of the urgency there. But I do think that it was more of a like, hey, this is a really good player that we know will make us better. Let's see what we can do with him, rather than anyone having any real preconceived notions of what they were getting.
Yeah. All right. On to something else. From Bill Jones, TRPT. We clearly have a lot of talent on our roster. We have historically elite defense, very good midfield choices, and a lot of good attacking talent. I think this can all be objectively true. Can you imagine what our team looks like at peak performance levels for the talent we have, and work backwards to describe how we can and will get there?
Well, as long-term listeners of the show know, I love to cop out on questions like that. This is exactly what I'm going to do. I think it depends on what the goal is, right? I think if Adrian Hanauer goes into Brian Schmetzer's office at the beginning of the season and says, I want you to have the best regular season that we can possibly have. I want to win a supporters shield. And I want to do whatever we have to do to get as many points out of this team as we can get out of this team. I think that with reasonably good injury luck and all that kind of thing, I think they're a Shield contender for sure. I think they could probably be a Shield front runner, right? If that's the main goal. I think if the goal is we want to win as many trophies as possible and we'll just kind of deal with whatever happens elsewhere, league wise, I think they can win. I think they can win. This team can win an MLS Cup. I think with slightly better luck, they could have won the Champions Cup. Obviously, Cruz Azul is a better team, right? But I think in a different reality where there's not a team as good as Cruz Azul in the competition, they have a good shot. I think this is one of the most talented teams they've ever had. So I think that, you know, maybe at the very top end, they don't have the elite talent, but I think when you have as much extremely good, like A tier talent as the Sounders have, you can accomplish a lot. And I think that coming the end of the season, this team is going to be an MLS Cup contender, no doubt. I think, you know, if you played a season that was just these guys in the 2014 Sounders, I think this team probably comes out on top. Like, I think this is probably the best team that the Sounders have had. I just think that the goals and priorities have shifted a little bit, to where having that, you know, stellar regular season just isn't as much of a priority anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all fair. My suspicion is Bill is hoping to get a little bit more of a tactical
that's fair enough.
Yeah, get her tactical views on this, which I still think the jury, I don't know the answer. I think that's part of the problem, is that there's a lot of interesting pieces on this team. I don't know that, like today, Brian mentioned they still would like to get all these pieces on the field together. But like, you know, there's I suppose you could throw out a 3-2-4-1 formation and you could put all your most talented players on the field together. I don't know if that's actually a coherent like setup. Like, are you really going to play Ryan Kent and I don't know, Pedro de la Vega as true wingers with Albert Rusnak and Jesus Ferreira as dual 10s with Jordan Morris up top? Like, could you do it? Probably. Could you do it with Obed Vargas and Christian Roldan sitting beneath them and Nuhu, Jackson Reagan, and Yamar? That lineup looks really exciting on paper. I don't know if that really makes sense for a 90-minute game against a competitive opponent. It would be a lot of fun to watch. I would love it, but I would have my concerns that it would get exposed on counters and all kinds of other things. So I don't know what the answer is in terms of how, like, I don't know if this is a team that you can get your 11 most talented players on the field together, but I don't know if you really need to either.
Yeah. I think that's okay.
Yeah. I think I still don't know who. I think that's what's great about the next, you know, they have 25 games to figure out what their best group is. And this is a cop-out answer, but I think they're going to probably want to use a few more of those games to figure. Because I'd be lying if I said I knew what it is. I think that would be a really fun. I hope at some point we see that group on the field together, even if it's chasing a goal, just because I think it would be a lot of fun. But I am skeptical that it would work for 90 minutes. I'll say that
for sure. I think too, a lot of this is just MLS getting to a point that a lot of other leagues have been at for a while, where if you look at the best teams in the Premier League or the best teams in the Bundesliga or whatever, they're not putting out the same lineup for every game. They are, and not just for rotational reasons, right? Like, they'll have really good players that would start in most other teams in the league sitting on the bench for tactical reasons. And I think that the Sounders are kind of there. Like, obviously you've got guys that are going to be written in pen, assuming they're healthy, like Jordan Morris. But the fact that you can look at your opponent and say, Jesus is a great player, but we think Ryan Kent is a better matchup for these guys. Or Jesus looks a little better. We like his slightly more aggressive style than Albert's for these opponents or whatever. The fact that you can do that is a luxury. And, you know, maybe it's not the question isn't like how do we get these guys on the field, but the question is how do we keep them happy with not starting every game is really the bigger one.
Yeah.
And kind of on a similar note, from Ben W, a bunch of zeros and then a 1. In your crystal ball, 2 months from now, how do you see the stack rank of Georgie, Ferreira, Rothrock, PDLV, and Kent?
This is a really interesting question. I think my gut tells me that Pedro is probably at the top of that list, and Rothrock or Georgie are at the bottom. And I don't know. I guess it'll be interesting. I am very interested to see how this works out. But like right now, I would say the ranking is probably Pedro, Ferreira, Rothrock, Georgie, Kent, like where we sit today. And I could see Kent moving anywhere. I could see him being at the top of that list potentially. I am really intrigued to see where he ends up. I could also see him still at the bottom. Like the reality is we've seen him play in a real game for about 10 minutes. I've seen him train a handful of times. And I don't know where that's going to end up, but let's just say for the sake of this question, for the sake of trying to answer it, I'm going to put De La Vega first, Kent second, Ferreira third, Georgie fourth, Rothrock fifth. And that's we'll see. I don't know. I don't know if you I don't know. I don't know how strong I feel about that, but
my gut says you're probably right. I think I would put Jesus second and Rothrock fourth, because we know largely what we have in Jesus. We know largely what we have in Rothrock. I think the odds of Georgie taking a big step forward are quite good. I think the odds of Kent showing that he is as good as he looked against Nashville are decent enough that it would not at all shock me if your order is right. I just think your order is the more sort of like, if things go well, this is what it looks like. Mine is more, I guess, I don't know.
I think it's
less
a good
optimistic, I guess, if you
to me,
will
it's a
look at it
great
that
group
way.
of 5 players. I will say that. I think that's I'd be happy to start most of those players together if you have Musovski or Morris as the 9.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Next one is
good.
Oh, no, I think it is your turn. Sorry.
Okay. So this is from MCB. The first 2 Sounders goals came directly off Roldan bodying Nashville players off balls on counter pressures. Did Christian get extra satisfaction sticking it to BJ, and will he be after Greg for similar reasons? So this is digging up old U.S. national team issues here.
I would guess that Christian has an extremely positive attitude towards Greg, because Greg kept calling him in.
I would imagine very much
and
so,
giving him caps when it was basically giving like half the fan base a aneurysm.
Yeah.
BJ not playing him in the Gold Cup was probably pretty annoying. But I think if he did, he got a lot of satisfaction out of it, and you would never ever know it. Like Christian seems like a dude who is extremely, like, would not shock me at all if he is driven entirely by petty grievances, but he is not the kind of person that would let that on. I don't know him, obviously. I've never met him, never talked to him. I only know what I see in the media, but that just kind of seems like the kind of guy he is, you know?
Yeah, I would. And honestly, I would imagine I really doubt he holds any ill will toward any coaches with the national team while he was, getting those call-ups. Because I think he, as much as he probably would have liked to have played more than he did, I think he also sort of appreciated getting the calls in the first place. And so, and he was getting consistent calls. I mean, he made a World Cup team where BJ Callahan was the assistant coach, right? So I suspect they have a good relationship. But Christian did have a really good game.
He did. He was great. He's great. I mean, I would imagine even if you have a great relationship with a former coach, it's motivation to play well,
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Just like you want to play well against your friends.
Yeah, for sure. Next one's from Nate B. Is Albert Rusnak too conservative of a player to be a lone 10 on an exciting attacking team, or will creative attacking pieces around him make his more possession-based play even more valuable?
I'm inclined to think that he is going to have that he's going to excel with more exciting players around him. Like, I'm really excited to see what he looks like when he's got, a Ryan Kent on one side, Pedro de la Vega on the other, and Jordan Morris in front of him. Like, that's a really exciting prospect. I don't think he's an inherently conservative player. He is not the most aggressive player. I'll grant you that, but it's not like, I don't, this is not a Peter Vianis kind of situation.
Right.
Like this is a guy who had 30 goal contributions last year. I think we can sometimes overstate his conservative style. He might not be as aggressive of a passer as Ferreira, and I think that's going to be an interesting contrast to see how they sort of play off one another or how that works out. But yeah, I don't think there's anything about Rusnak's play that means the Sounders can't be an exciting team when he's on the field.
Yeah. My hot take about the Rusnak is too conservative of a passer takes is that 99.9% of the time when people want Albert to make a pass and he chooses not to, he is making the right decision. I think people are used to people that play in his position making that pass.
Yeah.
And I think that people undersell how frequently it goes wrong. I think he understands his capabilities extremely well. I think he has a finely tuned sense of risk reward because he makes plenty of aggressive passes. He's just selective about when he makes them. And like you said, I think his numbers back up the fact that he can be an extremely effective attacking player. But I do think if you've got Jesus Ferreira playing on the wing and playing as sort of a creative player on the wing in more advanced spaces, not in the center of the pitch, he's probably going to make more aggressive passes. And I think that's totally fine to do.
All right. This is from Sounders fan. A lot has been said this season about winning the midfield and the great play of Obed and Christian Roldan. Can you talk about the difference between the great performance in Nashville and the bad performance? As an example, Cruz Azul and League 2. What do Obed and Christian do better or worse than their opponents?
I think Cruz Azul, they were just, it was just bad game state, bad vibes from the Areola injury, and just a talent differential from top to bottom. Cruz Azul is probably one of the best Mexican teams we've played, I think, ever in Champions Cup. They're an extremely good team, and I think kind of a bad matchup. I think there were also some tactical mismatch issues in that game where I think the Sounders midfield was kind of under the gun from the start, and the fact that they didn't play well was a big part of it. But I think it really is just as simple as, like, are you making the passes you need to make? Are you in the positions you need to be in? Are you keeping your positional discipline? Are you giving the game what it needs at any given time? One of the things that can be frustrating about Obed at times, and it's something you absolutely expect out of a younger player and something that's becoming less and less frequent, is that he's not making bad decision not making good decision when things aren't necessarily going well. He's trying to press a little harder than he should be, trying to make passes he shouldn't be making, getting out of position, going on walkabout, things like that. And I think he's a little more prone to do that than Christian. So yeah, I think it's a really boring answer to say they're just more effective in games when they play well. That's really what it comes down to. It's just, and I do think, kind of like what I mentioned earlier, if the attack is having a bad day, they're not able to keep possession, or they're not able to, connect passes in the attacking third. That's going to put a ton of pressure on the midfield. If there's a bad tactical matchup and you've got 2 versus 3, that's going to put some pressure on the defensive midfield. So It really depends on the game itself in terms of what the specific things are. But Obed and Christian's job is more or less to progress the ball to the attacking third, prevent counterattacks, make sure the opposition's midfield is challenged and is having difficulty getting through. And when they do those things, that's a great performance. And when they don't, that's a bad performance.
Yeah, and I would say that maybe a better example of a bad performance for them, or when they were less effective, was probably the San Diego game, where that's a matchup where theoretically you would think that they're going to get the better of that. Like, I would think on a man-to-man basis, I would take them over whoever San Diego had, and that it didn't work out well. I don't know how much they were at fault in that one. I know Christian sort of fell asleep on the first goal. I don't know if either one of the other two goals were really on them. So I don't know. I think that mostly they are, I think neither one of them are classic sixes. And so I think sometimes that gets them in a little bit of trouble. There's not necessarily, neither one of them are sort of like, they're not there to shield the defense. And so they are both players who like to have the ball at their feet, who are a little bit more finesse-y type of players in that area. So I think that certain matchups get the better of them there, but
they can definitely honestly, get bullied sometimes.
Yeah, but
by bigger guys.
I'll take them over. I'll take the pluses and minuses there, and I think that I'm not really worried about them as a central midfield pairing, generally speaking.
No, not at all.
All right, go ahead.
Oh, I think is it my turn?
You're up.
Okay, cool. From Ken W. Any real motivation for the team to get that U22 signed in the Club World Cup window versus a secondary window if availability and price are the same either way?
I think the only real motivation would be just timing. Like if they have the player identified and that player is available earlier in the window and is not already sort of like coming right out of a season, I would hope that they would try to get that player signed before the Club World Cup window. That said, I don't think that their availability is like, I don't think they're trying to sign a U22 with the Club World Cup top of mind. I think the roster of useful players that they have is probably what it is. And I realize that's not super exciting for a lot of folks. And I get it. Like, it would be great if the Sounders made some big signing with an eye specifically towards being competitive in the Club World Cup. I don't think realistically that's a U22 player. Like, that this U22 signing might be a contributor right away. They might be really good. Are they going to make a difference in the Club World Cup? Like, that seems unlikely to me. Yeah. Like, I think to the degree that they're able to be competitive in the Club World Cup, it's probably this roster. And honestly, Ryan Kent is probably as well positioned to be a useful player in that than anyone that they're gonna bring in on the U22 deal. So I don't think, I guess that's a long way of saying they might sign someone during that window, but I don't think that they're going to be a real difference maker in the Club World Cup.
Yeah. I think that, I know this isn't necessarily the most popular opinion, but I think doing anything with the goal of competing in the Club World Cup in mind is a bad idea. It is most likely 3 games, a competition you almost certainly don't have a chance of winning.
I mean, if they get out of the group, that has to be one of the great performances.
It's one of the greatest
history,
accomplishments they've ever had. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is. I know people want to put in a good showing, and there's the hope that they can. Yeah, I do too. And there's a hope that they can parlay that into, converting new fans and all that kind of good stuff. I don't think that one guy is going to be the difference there. And I think that taking the more holistic long-term view is the better way to go. But it's like you said, like, if they know the guy and they can get him before Club World Cup, I think it's always better to get the player sooner than later.
Yeah,
if you can,
totally.
Right? If you know you want to sign him, sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because the longer he has with the team, the better the odds are he can make a real impact this year. But I don't think the Club World Cup necessarily is a factor at all, or should be.
Yeah. All right, this is from Sounder Navia. Sounders tend to have a range of profiles to pick at different positions. I'm not sure if this is the result of trying to get different options or if it's just a byproduct of the GM bringing in the best players they can at the right price regardless of their natural role. One benefit of this positional flexibility, many of our players can play several roles. However, a downside we see is consistently is that the role asked of our first option at a position may not be repeatable by option 2 if that first player is unavailable, and may also lead to uncertainty about where players fit best on the pitch. This is a long question. Would you like to see the Sounders build their squad in a more positionally consistent mode, i.e. get 2 similar profile players for each position to the extent that it's possible? Or do you like a more get the good players and let Spencer sort them out approach?
I think that there are lots of coaches that say, I don't really care who the guys are. They just need to fit the specific profile for my system to work. And this is exactly the kind of player I need. And I don't, even if player B that you're looking at is not as good as player A, if player B is closer to the guy I need for this role, that's the guy I want. And then there is the system of we're just going to get the best players we can get at each position group and figure it out. And I don't think either one is inherently better than the other one in a vacuum. But I think in MLS, having the kind of setup the Sounders have is generally going to be preferable because for all the obvious reasons, right? Like salary cap league, smaller player pool, less talented player pool, frankly, than a lot of other better leagues. And I think with the Sounders, especially just kind of running things the way they do, operating the way they do, having a lot of flexibility and just trying to find the best players you can that can fit within a nominal system is the way to go.
Yeah, I tend to agree that I think MLS is a league where flexibility is key. And I think that you can go down the line in terms of what's important there. I would imagine maybe this is about this is another number 9 kind of question. And I don't know, maybe it would be better if they had a third classic number 9 on the roster, but like I don't know that I believe that Asaze de Rosario, to use a player from the Defiance, is going to be an upgrade over Jesus Ferreira at the number 9 just because he plays the number 9 more like a cheap version of Danny Masovsky. Like I don't necessarily think that's the case. And I think that's sort of what you get into if you're in a roster situation like MLS. You are essentially getting cheaper versions of the same player. And at some point that player just is not going to be as effective. And I don't think there's any way around that. And it would be a real shame if you had, you could, it was just like a plug and play. Like I know Garth used to talk about this, about kind of wanting to have this plug and play type of thing. And I don't know how realistic that even really is, but yeah. I think this is probably the right approach. I think you want to get the best soccer player you can, and having positionally flexible players, I think is probably good. Even if it means you don't have 4 comparable fullbacks or
right
3 comparable strikers or 3 comparable number 10s or whatever it might be. Yeah.
All right. Last question is from Dorcas. With the demise of Peter Vermees, Brad Schmetzer is now the longest tenured head coach in MLS with 13 years in his position. Now, I'm not sure about that math, but I know what they mean. And he is the longest tenured head coach in MLS, I believe. But
well, because I guess head coach. I think he explains it here. I think if you keep going, I think he explains this.
With 6 years as an assistant and another 6 years as head coach of the A-League Sounders, how has he kept his message fresh in Seattle?
Yeah, so I think the way he gets here, he doesn't really explain it, but I think what he's saying, because this is 7 years with 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Oh no, this is like his 10th year.
So it's 8 years with
8 full seasons as
8 full seasons in the MLS head coach, and then 6. So that's 14.
Yeah, I don't know how the math here worked, Dorcas, but I think I see what your point is, and it's not about how many years.
Yeah.
It's that he's been with this team forever, and how does he keep his message fresh? I don't know that he does. I don't know. I think he probably does a good. I think he's a flexible. I take it back. I do think he is good about adapting his style. I don't know that his messaging actually is fresh. I think he uses a lot of the same principles, and I'm sure there's some eye rolling in the locker room about it and whatnot. But it is pretty remarkable that he's been this effective for this long. I don't think you can I don't think you have to worry about the A-League era. I don't even know how much there is really to be said about his time with the assistant coach, because he's been the Sounders head coach now. This is I think this is his 10th season as head coach of the Sounders. Not 10th complete season, but this is his 10th year as the head coach of the Sounders. I mean, basically everyone here has only known him as the head coach, with a couple exceptions. Christian, Jordan, and Steph, I think, are the only 3 players who actually played for him as an assistant. But being able to be the head coach of one team for 10 years, put everything else aside, that's tough. And it is pretty remarkable. There's not a lot of coaches that are able to do this. I think you can say that he's been a lot more successful than Peter Vermees was in a longer time. But, I think he's done more in his time than Vermees did in his time at Sporting Kansas City. And you can argue maybe he was starting at a higher point. So it's not a great comparison. I don't know. I don't know the secret to Brian Schmetter's success. I think to some degree it's that he's willing to be adaptable. He's not die hard in one style of play. He's not die hard about one. I think that was maybe one of Peter Vermees' downfalls, is that he was really committed to this sort of like 4-3-3 semi-pressing style, whereas the Sounders have played a lot of different formations and a lot of different, models of play over the years. So maybe I think his adaptability is maybe what's been key.
Yeah, that really does seem to be a huge part of it. He's adaptable. I think he has an ego in his own way, because he
definitely has an ego,
successful. Yeah. But I think he also has the necessary humility to sort of counteract that. He has full support of the front office, which has to help.
That's a big thing for sure. Yeah.
He has credibility, right? Like, he has credibility. He's been here forever. People seem to come here and really like the organization and love the city and like being Sounders. And he's the guy. It's like playing for Nick Saban in Alabama or something.
Right.
Like, of course you're gonna have respect for that person if you care about the club and you're excited to be there. He's just the sort of inseparable from the club at this point, and I think that gives him a lot of credibility, even if, as I'm sure, as you said, sometimes it gets a little old for guys that have been playing for him for 10 years, but he's still Brian Schmetzer.
I think players trust him. I think he's shown himself to be a player. I like when players have notes for him, I think he probably listens. So it's, I think it's just kind of the stuff that makes leaders, good, effective leaders effective, right? It's sort of surrounding yourself with competent people and letting them have voices, and not thinking that the right ways. You always know the right answer is key. Having a policy that is coherent and not being driven by old grievances.
Are we still talking about soccer? Or?
Oh, geez. I'm sorry. I may have got a little off. Sorry there. I was losing my head. But anyway,
it it is a fair point, though, that is what leadership is. Some people think leadership is never admitting
you're wrong,
that you're wrong, and just trusting your gut all the time and doing
Right.
what. Whereas real leadership is making the best decisions you can and
and learning from them and admitting your mistakes and not. And it's like everyone makes mistakes. It's do you keep repeating the same ones over and over again?
Yep.
And as if you're not repeating the same mistakes, you're probably making progress, right? And I think, Brian is not perfect. I don't think anyone asked him to be perfect. And I think he's willing to change and evolve, and I think that's a great sign of a good leader. So anyway, that's what we got. That's all the questions. Thank you again for sending those in. Thank you to our sponsors, Full Pool Wines, Hacks and Ferments, Body Spec. Hopefully you guys are taking advantage of all those great offers. And I guess that's it. I think. Thank you to Lick It. Thank you for producing the show. I think that's all I got. I'm Jeremiah Shan signing off for Aaron Campo. This is Nos Arietes, and remember, you'll never get alone.
I expect a LAFC who's motivated to prove themselves at home, to prove to their fans that they're capable of winning in this league. And it's up to us to really brew in the party. You guys like that? No? Awkward joke, dad joke right there, huh?